we're talking about anxiety this afternoon. It is one of the most common experiences in modern life. Anybody know what anxiety is? You ever experienced anxiety? Hey, I have.
Yeah.
If you're human, you will at some point experience this thing called anxiety. And yet, for Christians, many Christians, it remains one of the hardest things to speak honestly and openly about. Because often, when we feel anxious, we also feel guilty for being anxious. Okay? And in some church circles, if you communicate that you're anxious, oh my goodness, then, you're not spiritual enough. Man, you should have more faith. Whatever, I've been in those circles. And we wonder, shouldn't I trust God more? Shouldn't I be beyond this by now? And why do I still feel so unsettled? And so anxiety often becomes not just a burden, but a private shame.
Yeah.
Sometimes a public shame. But often it's a private shame. And we live in an age of extraordinary inner noise. I've been saying that for the last few weeks now. Constant information, constant uncertainty, constant awareness of world events. If you've got a phone, a smartphone, you're constantly alerted to world events, financial crisis, financial pressures, health concerns. I know some of you have had health concerns recently, relational strain, and also future uncertainty. What is going to happen? To me personally, what is going to happen to our country, to our world? Some of you are carrying that right now. Because I've spoken to some of you, to many of you. And even when eventually life appears manageable, internally many people carry just this quiet restlessness. And at its deepest level, anxiety is often connected to control. Not because we are bad people, but because we're human. We long for certainty, we long for predictability, and we long for stability, and not forgetting, we long for reassurance. Or is it just me?
No.
And when life feels uncertain, the soul instinctively reaches for control. And into that very human experience, Jesus says some astonishing words here. He says, do not worry about your life. Now, this is so important, guys. Jesus isn't dismissing human anxiety here. He is addressing it very tenderly, I think. And we'll read the full passage in a moment. Because Jesus understands the human heart. He knows our vulnerability. He knows our fears. He also knows our tendency to carry tomorrow before it even arrives. And when Jesus says, do not worry, he's not saying never feel anxious. He is inviting us into a different way of carrying uncertainty. Because anxiety is not overcome through just force of will. Believe me, I've tried. Trust is learned relationally. And here's the thing, many of us know Scripture deeply, and yet still we battle internally with overthinking, with fear about the future, with carrying outcomes, and mentally we're just exhausted. Nikki and I, a few years ago, not that long ago, we were going through a real upheaval we felt in our lives. Some of you know the story. Just a real upheaval. We were at our house called Carlisle for many years. Long time ago. Many years in this house. But we just outgrew it. And eventually our landlord just said, I'm sorry, but they gave us, what is that section?
21 notice.
21. They gave us a section 21. And it was time for you to leave. Now, we hadn't left for many years. We hadn't moved for a significant amount of time, and we weren't aware of the market and how the market had changed, and suddenly we got into a bit of a wheel spin. How are we going to manage? How are we going to do this? And my mind started to go in overdrive. How are we going to do this? And so we looked at the market, and it was just almost impossible for us to even find a place. We went to a couple of viewings, and I mean, it's like going to a viewing, but they've got 20 other people also at the same time. So you're under pressure now because now you're all competing for the same place. Anybody know what I'm talking about there? And this anxiety, this pressure started to build. And there's this temptation now. I've got to fix it. How am I going to do this? And so this message today isn't about pretending that anxiety disappears instantly, because it certainly didn't disappear instantly for us. We faced it for a very long time, and then we got into another situation that was very difficult, which compounded that anxiety. So today isn't about pretending that anxiety disappears instantly. It's about learning how to remain close to Jesus in the middle of uncertainty. And we were in a very uncertain place in our lives. And in Matthew chapter 6, verse 27, Jesus says, "Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life?" That's such a striking question, guys, because underneath anxiety, there is often an assumption that if I think about this enough, perhaps I can control it. And at its core, anxiety is often connected to uncertainty. We do not like not knowing. Not knowing what will happen or how things will turn out or whether people will change or whether situations will improve or whether we will be okay. And so the human heart instinctively reaches for control. And I got into that situation. I'm trying to figure this thing out. And I got our family into a situation, guys, that was so not good for us. And it's taken us a long time to get over it. And this control is not always external. Sometimes it's internal. We rehearse conversations, we replay scenarios, or we anticipate certain outcomes, and we prepare mentally for possibilities as though carrying things internally might somehow protect us from pain. Many people are physically present but mentally elsewhere, carrying tomorrow's problems, carrying future conversations, and possible disappointments, and unresolved situations. And over time, guys, this creates profound inner fatigue.
Yeah.
Not because we're weak, but because the mind was never designed to carry the weight of endless uncertainty alone. And what makes anxiety difficult is that control often feels responsible, even wise. And so we tell ourselves, and I've told myself, I'm just thinking things through. I'm just trying to be prepared, or I need to stay ahead of this. And there have been moments recently where I've realized just how easy it is to carry tomorrow internally before it even arrives. You know, mentally rehearsing situations, thinking ahead, carrying conversations, and trying to hold outcomes together in my mind. And outwardly, you can still function. You can. Normally, but inwardly there can be this quiet tension of trying to manage things emotionally before they've even happened. Can anybody relate to that? And I've sensed Jesus gently reminding me again recently that trust isn't learned through controlling outcomes. It's learned through remaining close to Him in the middle of uncertainty. Not having every answer, not knowing exactly how things are going to turn out or unfold, but by learning that the Father knows. Learning that the Father knows. And that I don't have to carry tomorrow alone. And this is what Nikki and I discovered in this really tumultuous situation. We couldn't fix it. We could not fix our own situation. We couldn't fix it ourselves. Some of you know this. And somehow God came and presenced Himself with us, which led us to have certain conversations, which led us to stability again and peace again. It didn't come overnight though. There's wisdom in thoughtful stewardship, guys. But there's a difference between responsibility and internal control. Responsibility says, I will do what I can. But control says, I must carry the outcome. And then Jesus knowingly exposes something, that worry does not actually give us control. It only gives us the feeling of involvement. And that's why anxiety can become addictive in subtle ways. But mentally carrying something can feel like we're doing something about it. I was there. But often we are simply exhausting the soul. And in many ways, anxiety is the soul attempting to carry what belongs ultimately to God. Whether that's tomorrow, whether that's outcomes, whether that's people or circumstances or the future. I was talking to somebody yesterday who's really anxious about what's happening in the world right now. And for many believers especially, this often hides beneath competence. We carry things quietly internally, we keep functioning, we keep serving, we keep showing up, but inwardly there is this tension. Because we are trying to hold things together, trying to hold things together only God can hold. This is why Jesus says, do not worry about your life. Do not worry, not as a criticism, but as an invitation. As though he is saying, you do not have to carry tomorrow alone. And this is where trust becomes really difficult. Because trust means releasing the illusion that we can secure ourselves through control. Trust requires openness. It requires dependence. It requires surrender. And guys, when we were in this place, it was hard to surrender to God. Because we panicked. We felt like we didn't have enough time. And we felt deeply vulnerable. So how do we actually learn trust? How do we live peacefully in a world that remains uncertain? This is what Matthew chapter 6, verse 31 to 32 says. Do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? Or what shall we drink? Or what shall we wear? Your heavenly Father knows that you need them. And that phrase matters deeply. Your Father knows. Your heavenly Father knows.
Yeah.
Notice carefully that Jesus doesn't say, he does not say nothing difficult will happen. Or life will become predictable. Or even you will always understand what God is doing. We didn't understand what God was doing in that moment. We didn't. And Jesus never promises a full, explainable life. We didn't have the answers. And yet he directs anxiety away from certainty, and he directs anxiety toward relationship with the Father. At its core, anxiety is not only about circumstances, but it's also about security. We long to know, will I be okay? Will my kids be okay? Will God take care of me? Am I alone in this? Can I trust him with what I cannot control? And Jesus answers those questions, not first with explanations, but with a revelation of the Father. He reveals the Father in that verse. The Father knows. Guys, this isn't distant theology here. This is deeply personal. Jesus does not say God is aware of your situation. He says the Father knows. Meaning that you are seen. Meaning that you are not forgotten. Your needs are not hidden from him. And your future is not outside of his sight. We've had to explain this to one of our children this week, who has a bit of uncertainty about where they're at in life at the moment. But the Father knows. Their future is not out of his sight. And one of the effects of anxiety is that it narrows our vision. And so what we do is we become consumed by outcomes and possibilities and fears and even worst case scenarios. And slowly our world becomes very, very small. My voice went really high there. Wow. I didn't know I was capable of that. Very small, very internal, very pressured. But Jesus gently widens the lens.
Yeah.
Jesus says, look at the birds of the air. What a surprising things to say to anxious people in this moment. Hey, look at the birds of the air. What does he do? He redirects their attention away from inner spiraling to the care of the Father visible in creation itself. This is not Jesus being simplistic here. This is Jesus retraining our attention.
Yeah.
Because anxiety fixes the soul on what might happen, and Jesus fixes the soul on who the Father is. And this is the key for us today. Trust isn't built through having all the answers. It is built in knowing the one who holds us.
Yes.
This is why Christians can sometimes carry deep peace even while circumstances remain unresolved. Many of you know what I'm talking about. You've experienced this, not because certainty disappeared or uncertainty disappears, but because relationship with Jesus, relationship with the Lord deepens in those difficult moments. Trust is usually formed gradually, quietly, and with repeated return. Through learning over time that God remains faithful and that His presence remains steady. And guess what? He carries us even when life feels uncertain. Some of us are exhausted because we've been searching for certainty when Jesus is just offering His presence. And those are not the same thing.
Yeah.
Often God does not give us control over our tomorrow. Perhaps the invitation is not figure everything out yourself. Perhaps the invitation this afternoon is stay close to the Father who knows. So what does it actually look like to walk through anxious seasons with Jesus practically? How do we carry uncertainty differently? Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 6, verse 11 and then verse 34. Give us today our daily bread. And then later in verse 34, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Can I just tell you, I hope you don't mind me sharing this. I wasn't planning on sharing this. We got to the end of December, and into January. December for all of us, Christmas is an expensive time, right? And then we get to January, February, Benji's birthday, and then March the 3rd, Abby's birthday, March the 31st, Sophie's birthday. Do you get what I'm saying? So that means we were really stretched financially. How are we going to, all these birthdays, you've got to make it special for them. And Nix and I, we don't necessarily always praying together, Lord, will you come and provide for us? But just being aware of His presence. And sometimes I know that Nix, when she goes into another room with her guitar and she's worshiping Jesus, she's just connecting with the Father again. Not trying to fix the problem immediately, not trying to figure it out, but just connecting with the Father. And that's an incredible example to me when she does that. So we go, after this we go to a charity shop. Now we got no money, but we go to a charity shop and Nick says, Jean, can you please buy me this bag? It's £2, right? So we go to, I forget the name of the shop, and it's how would you describe it? Crochet. It's a crocheted bag, nothing fancy at all.
I really like it.
She liked it, but it was £2.
It's
okay?
from you to me, from me. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got it. I said, sure. So £2. I can manage that. I can do it. £2, and so we get it. And then we get home, and the next comes to me in the kitchen. I don't know what I was doing, packing the dishwasher or something. I seem to do that a lot. And so she says to me, Jean, did you do this? I don't even know what she's saying. And she says, I said, I don't know what you mean. She says, did you put this in my bag? I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And then she unzipped, there's an inner pocket in this little cheap bag, unzips it and pulls out £100. She says, did you put this in this bag? I said, no, I didn't. But this realization that God cares. Some person did that on purpose. Convinced of that. And it's the Father saying, okay, here's the coin in the fish's mouth just for you. That's the Father, guys. That is the Father. And Jesus teaches us to pray, not give me certainty for the next 10 years, not explain my whole future, but simply give us today our daily bread. Guess what we did with the £100? We were able to buy bread, food. A lot of bread, because our kids eat a lot of bread. And this is deeply important spiritually, because God often meets us daily. Not all at once. Daily. And we see this in the wilderness with Israel. God provided manna one day at a time. Enough for the day. And whenever they tried to hoard it out of fear for tomorrow, what happened? Anybody remember? It would spoil. Because God wasn't merely feeding them. He was teaching them this thing called dependence. Yeah?
Yeah.
I hope you can resonate with this. I know some of you really can. God teaches us to live today with God. And for some of us, peace will begin to return when we stop asking, how do I carry the next 5 years? Instead, ask, how do I walk with Jesus now, today? Guys, that changes the soul. There's something humbly about daily dependence, and relationship with God is usually learned daily. Trust today, grace today, bread today. Can we pray together this afternoon?